Black Writers After Hours. Fiction writer, journalist and DJ, Desiree Reynolds oozes cool. Her novel Seduce was published by People Tree Press to much acclaim. She explores the continuous struggle against the white male gaze, questioning notions of beauty, race and being. Desiree has been writer-in-residence at Sheffield Archives, so I was very curious to know if she had been a nerdy kid.
One of the first books I remember reading is Twelfth Night, Shakespeare, and actually getting it and thinking it was hilarious. And that would have been, I think I might have been about 10 or 11.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I'm not quite understanding exactly what all the words mean because it's a completely different language, but I did get the jokes. And then suddenly it felt a little bit like this world that I wasn't supposed to be a part of, that I never saw myself reflected in, I could do. So obviously I've read before that, but that's one of the things I remember reading, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I was a voracious reader. I read cornflakes packets over and over again. I read everything, ingredients on stuff in the cupboard. But I remember reading Twelfth Night thinking, this is hilarious, and nobody understanding that I was just a nerdy kid.
Yeah, that feels like quite a precocious, first
for
for
sure.
a 10-year-old.
Oh, for sure. For sure, precocious, nerdy. I was also into comics. So I have a bigger brother, and anybody with a bigger brother would have comics and graphic novels. He was a prolific comic collector. So Silver Surfer and Spider-Man and Black Panther, X-Men, Conan the Barbarian. Incredibly racist and sexist, and I loved it. And other comics like that. So yeah, my brother had quite a big influence on the things that I read. So I read everything, but I just remember Twelfth Night in particular. In terms of creatively writing, it's quite hard to pinpoint it really. I've always been a creative writer, if we define it as somebody that makes up stories. I don't necessarily define it by somebody who's published. I think we get caught up with that a little bit too much. And I've always creatively written. I wrote diaries, secret diaries, but I'm not sure that I knew what a diary was. I think I'd read somewhere that girls kept diaries, so I thought girls who then became writers, they all kept diaries. All the Brontes, everybody kept diaries. So I thought maybe that's what I should be doing. I should be keeping, which I never did properly. 1 week to the next would go by, and I forgot. Got to put something in the diary. And inevitably, growing up in Clapham, it's, in a very, very working class area. At the time, it really isn't that now, but at the time, it's very, very working class, very mixed area. Then I had to make stuff up to make it interesting, to make my diary interesting. I would have to make stuff up. So I've always written stories. I've always felt that life of fiction was more relevant to me than fact.
Okay. Thank you. So when you're constructing a story now, whether it's for a commission or your own creative work, what comes first? Is it character? Is it plot? Or is there an order?
I think it's I think writing for a commission is very different to writing of your own volition. Writing for a commission means something else. It requires something else. It's a way of earning money, so you better do it. Whereas if it's your own thing, you might leave it. Leave it for another week, another 2 weeks, and then, get back to it. But I quite like writing to commission because it stretches you. Like when say, well, can you write me a short story of maybe 2,000 words on the color yellow. Go. Initially, you're like, what am I supposed to write? I don't know what I'm meant to say. And then, you sit in front of a blank page and get to it. So I think it requires something different, which I appreciate. I'm actually quite lazy otherwise. So somebody saying, right, this date, this theme, this many words, go, I kind of respond to.
Okay.
When somebody says, write what you want, whenever you want, I'm like, okay. So it's a very different process for me. But right now, so I take out the commission idea and write about what I want to write about. Well, then that's about anything that touches you, really. I feel quite strongly that stories come through you rather than, it's a very different way of sort of, I don't know, like when you try to wrestle a story into being. I don't think that works.
Okay.
Or it certainly doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I have to get the story to kind of travel through me so the story feels like it's already there. Okay. And in writing, I'm trying to get different ways to doing it. I'm sure I've probably told this to Ella before about how we construct a story, and that it feels a little bit like a castle with a moat, and the moat's got piranhas and crocodiles in it, and you are on the outside as a writer trying to tap your way into how to get into this story. So you're getting into the story and you are bringing the reader with you. So it could be character. It could be that you think of a person. Yeah. And that person then has a story around that person. Like I said, it could be a colour. It could be a landscape. It could be a feeling. It could be a sensation. And these are all the things you're doing to get into the castle of the story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like a spark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said that, you mentioned that you feel like you're lazy when you're putting together your own writing for yourself. So how do you bring up your energy for that? How do you stay kind of productive or work through that like laziness, or do you not and you just wait?
I think it's got to be a bit of both. There's never a answer, unfortunately. And a thing that might work for me today might not work for me tomorrow. I think sometimes the writing industry just has us trapped in an idea that somebody has the answer of how to write properly. They sell us tickets based on this idea, right? They sell us like retreats and books based on an idea of this is how you're supposed to do it. And I think it's very individual. By lazy, I mean, like I write for myself, first of all. This is a very weird thing to say because I am published, but I didn't start to write to be published. Yeah. The idea of being published was not ever in my mind when I started to write. Yeah. I just needed to do it. And I think one of the other things that's very influential to me is Toni Morrison, who said that very, very famous quote that everybody keeps saying, but it's true. If you don't see what you want to read, you write it. And I kind of took that to heart. I don't see my mom or my dad. I don't see my street. I don't see my ends. I don't see my city. So I just chose to write it. So going back to your question about what is it lazy or working through laziness, it's not what you do. My laziness comes from the idea that I'm not good enough, imposter syndrome, I can't do it, it's not worth it, I'm not the right person to tackle this subject, whatever. But I will never stop doing it. It doesn't stop me from writing. I don't believe in writer's block. I think that's something, maybe you just need a break. And then you will get back to it eventually whenever you want to. I don't believe there's a magic alchemy going on here. I think you, for me anyway, that I pursue what I need to hear. So therefore, I actually do end up doing it.
But has that those feelings of like imposter syndrome and kind of uncertainty, have they decreased as you've kind of witnessed your own success?
No.
Or, okay, they kind of come back, yeah.
Because I don't think it ever decreases, and I'm all right with it now. I think what used to stress me out is that I used to think I should be feeling a certain way. I am published now. I've earned money now. Surely I should be feeling a certain way. And then I just thought, you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I think I should be feeling. Just kind of just move with it, really. And to not worry. The fact that you feel a little bit shit or a little bit sad, or I think, I can write, and I'm sure all the other writers have said, I can write a sentence and think, who wrote that? That's the best sentence that's ever written by anybody in the history of mankind, humankind, womankind. This is amazing. And then 2 minutes later, I'm like, this is the worst thing that anybody has ever written, ever. It's awful. So but what I struggle with is worrying about that from A to Z thing, because that's the thing that stops you. And to like, okay, I am that person that will be like that. So, but I'll just have to just do it anyway.
Yeah, I think it's like resisting your emotions actually creates maybe more stress or frustration.
Yeah. There was a director, quite a famous director, I can't remember who he was, but he said that his wife had divorced him because he spends a lot of time just staring out of a window. She's like, what are you doing? And he's just, but I'm creating, but I'm staring out of a window. And I think that kind of the idea of being productive, it's sold to us as an idea of who we should be. Kind of Instagram writing, forget that. Just do whatever comes to you in a way that makes you feel good. The story is the most important thing. So that you are working for the story. Does that make sense? I'm not important. And what I think an idea of an audience is also not as important. The story dictates the story.
You've got to have that belief, I guess, and faith in your story.
I think, it's interesting, isn't it? I think probably the belief comes from it needing to be told, not necessarily that I've done a really good job. Yeah. And I don't know whether I've done a good job. And I'm really happy to not be the decider of whether I've done a good job. Obviously, you produce whatever you can to the best of your ability. And then after that, it's someone else's job to decide that you've done a good job. I think another thing that stops writers and stops me is that, is this any good? I don't know if this is any good. Is this any good? And it will be great to somebody and really bad to somebody else. I remember when I did my first book and I had to go into a university and they'd had it on the curriculum. I was like, what? They've got my book on the curriculum. And then they let me see the essays, the students' essays, some nice stuff from the student essays. And they were like, what Reynolds is trying to do here is blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, who are they talking about? Who are they talking about? Oh, they're talking about me. Yeah. And they got something from it that I never planned. I never thought of. And that is a good piece of writing. If it means something to different people, different things to different people, I think that's a good piece of writing.
Yeah, you don't know what the reception's going to be.
No.
Yeah, and you can't control it.
Well, this is the thing. I think we're in an age where we think we can control everything and we really can't. So letting go of what we think we can control is a really good thing. And audiences, it's a tricky thing because if you're doing genre writing, if you're doing like romance or detective fiction, I love detective fiction. If you're doing detective fiction, it's very structured and an audience has a set of expectations. Yeah. Certain things have got to happen to make it detective, to make it romance, to make it science fiction. Yeah. We expect those tropes. And therefore an audience is probably quite important in that process as a writer and an audience. But for me, who I have just write fiction, and I've just got into essay writing, which I find far more difficult. the audience I have to not think about the audience. You can't think about the audience. Otherwise, you're not going to get any kind of authenticity, even though I hate that word. But you're not going to get anything real if you're constantly worrying about whether you're going to get published or the audience.
Yeah. And do you have any like ritual thing that you do to actually help yourself to kind of just be in that inward space?
I think my rituals change.
Okay.
When I've got two boys, and when they were younger and I was writing, I wasn't doing it consciously, but I'd be writing on the backs of envelopes and bills and things that was to hand whilst I was doing something else, and then collect them up and put them all together. And now they can sort themselves out. It's a little bit different. I wish I was a bit more of a, what's the word? Strategic. I wish I was a more strategic writer. I'm a bit more emotional, which means that I'll just go with the flow. Which doesn't make me as productive as other writers, I think. Some writers know what they're going to write. I never know what I'm going to write. I'll write it, step back, go back, and then shape it. And I think the real craft comes in editing. Anybody can just write. And I often meet students who are like, oh, the tyranny of the page, like, really? Just, do your thing, take a break, then get back to it. And the craft comes in the editing. But my rituals change. I have a friend who, she wakes up at 5. She does some stretches and yoga. She does her counselling. Then she writes for a few hours. Then she goes for a walk. And she's as productive as, I go and stay with her like once a year just so I can pick up her productive vibe, because she's brilliant. But that really works for her, and she's an amazing writer. But my rituals tend to change. But I am that person that's hung up on stuff, like, maybe I need that pen. Why is Paper Chase shut now? I need that notebook. Maybe I need that special thing. I need good coffee. It's all delaying tactics, really.
But also I feel like creating a sense, like again, like another buzzword, like safe space, but like, creating that sense of security, stability, and kind of calm that maybe you need to feel like you can like then delve into your work.
I don't know. I think it's just.
Is it just procrastinating?
For some people, for me, it's procrastinating. I wouldn't say it's for everybody, but then for some people, that unsafe space is where they create that space of like when you might be literally anguish and hysteria and broken-hearted, and you're on an edge. That some people can write from that space as well. So I think it's a very individual thing.
I wanted to ask you about in Seduce. Your process, or maybe there wasn't like a process specifically, maybe it just came of writing in patois.
What I did is I wrote 20,000 words of it not being in patois. I was curious as to, did it start in patois? It started as patois in my head.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, knowing that I was going to be working with a publisher, I then sort of wrote it as straightforward English, 20,000 words. Wasn't right. Just wasn't right.
Yeah.
Just didn't work. And I had to ditch it. So those, and I work with lots of poets who don't want to change a word. Oh, I've dashed 20,000 words, mate. Come on. But I had to, when it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
I'm reading this, what felt like a little bit anglicized thing. Just didn't work, didn't connect. And then, had to dash it and start again. And that was fairly painful. But it worked better, and I'm I quite like first person. I know lots of proper fiction writers, and I won't say their names, who kind of look down their noses at first person, but I like it. It's a way of getting somebody involved in the world or the narrative of the story that you're trying to say. It does mean that whole constructing a story can be quite tough, because who else sees what else is happening? So the third person, well, what other people call the God voice, allows you to say what someone else did and how somebody else felt, and then what somebody else did.
Yeah.
So I get that, but I quite like a challenge. There will be an easy way to do something, and there will be a hard way to do something, and I always go the hard way.
But did you have to work on, like the patois? Like, or was it something that? Did you have to do like research on that, or was it something that you flowed? Like, nice.
I think the one of the things that I did have to research is spellings.
Yes. Okay.
Well, I think it's spelled like this. How does this feel? I talked to my mum quite a lot, because obviously I'm Jamaican diaspora.
Yeah.
Been there and lived there when I was little in Jamaica, but not for a very long time. So I needed her to steer me, and of course, as far as she was concerned, I was always wrong, mums. But this is, this is the thing about being diaspora, isn't it? You create that pace. I created that Caribbean.
Yes.
That Caribbean may not be real. It's not today's Caribbean. And those Caribbean writers that live in the Caribbean, it's down to them to tell those stories.
Yeah.
And I would never encroach on that. But I decided to tell this story.
Yeah.
And from my very, very specific point of view. So in terms of like the research for the narrative, I didn't have to do that. I did go to Jamaica. I just swaned around for a week, couple of weeks. Me and my brother swanning around. We went to quite a few different places, which just, I think you have a kind of bank when you're writing. You probably heard this from other writers, where you have a bank of feelings, a bank of words, a bank of things that touch you, and you use that. You stick that in the bank for when you need it. Do you know what I mean? So I needed to swan about Jamaica for a bit. I mean, by swanning, I had to also go and see relatives, and so not quite as much swanning as I would have liked it to have been. But I had to collect feelings and smells and colours and textures. I had to collect that, and then keep it in my bank for when I needed it. So that was my research.
It's research.
It is, rather than like compared to the work that I'm doing now, which is very specific research, but that was very different.
Yeah. Yeah. So to go to, you mentioned you grew up in Clapham, and you now live in Sheffield.
Yeah.
What's for you the difference in both the scene, the writing scenes and the opportunities, and also in like how you get inspired in those two spaces?
Oh, okay. It is very, very different. I hadn't quite stepped into the writer role when I was in London. I didn't quite know how to do it. So I wasn't quite there yet. So the scene in London, which is still very London-centric, all the money's there, the competitions are there, the access to interesting events is there, the community's there. I was more a fan, skirting on the outskirts of doing quite a lot of things, and attending events and stuff, rather than like being on a panel, or that actually happened when when I came up to Sheffield to do my first degree. So it is very different. I found Sheffield really white, racist, misogynist. The things that I wasn't dealing with in London. I mean, it's not to say that London isn't racist on the way, because it completely is. It's just they're not saying it to your face. And when I remember, this is like the mid-90s. So when I came up to Sheffield, people would just say some like terrible stuff to your face. And the writing community wasn't the same. The creative community wasn't the same. But at the same time, so there's a plus and a minus. And the plus is I feel like I could do whatever I wanted to.
Sure.
Because you recreate yourself wherever you go, right?
Yeah.
So you're at home and you're the person that everybody sees you as being, including your parents. So everybody needs to move out of the house to help form that identity away from family and friends and extended family. So then coming up away from them, I was able to form who I was and what I wanted to do, and the things, and in fact a lot of the things that I'm doing now. I mean, you know, there's so many writers that don't live in the places that they were born. James Baldwin wrote his best stuff in Paris it wasn't Paris, was it? It was, anyway, in France he kind of wrote. And lots of other writers, County Cullen, all that Harlem Renaissance stuff, didn't stay in the States to write. They wrote somewhere else, but they're making critical commentary about the States. Do you know? So you can be somebody else when you're not at home.
Yeah. Because you said, you say on your biography, after spending a lot of time doing lots of things, I'm finally where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to do. So do the other things that you were doing, did they feed into your creative process?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But not in the way that you think.
Okay.
So back in them days, there used to be Saturday girls. They were called, can you believe it? They were called Saturday girls, and they worked in shops on a Saturday. And you were there to, like if you like hairdressers. I worked in hairdressers, sweeping up hair. I worked in Evans, the shop for outsized ladies. That's what they used to be called on the front of the thing there. I worked in a black theatre in Brixton. I worked as a journalist. I was 16. I was the journalist for the Jamaican Gleaner. I was the carnival correspondent.
Okay. That's a great job title.
Well, you know what I spent the whole time doing? Really? They're going to make me the carnival correspondent. Okay. But I did do a lot of awful meetings where, you know, you're there with the police and the carnival committee and negotiating fences and boring stuff like that, and then did the whole carnival thing a few times. So all of that, for sure, if we go back to what I said about feeding your bank, all of that feeds your bank. So I've been grappling with an idea recently. Also, when I was the Saturday girl at Evans, a woman came in. She was a nun in a brown habit. And I've always seen them in black, but never seen them in brown.
Yeah.
And she was looking quite frantically for something in this shop, and it's my job to go and ask her. So I said, can I help you? And she said, yeah. She's still looking around. She goes, I'm looking for something in the N-word brown.
Oh.
And I was like, wait, what? What? Hang on, what? And she went, yeah. N-word brown. Can I just I'm just looking for something in that. And I was, you know, even now it still takes my breath away, the memory of it. But I was stunned, and I kind of went home to my mum, and she was like, "Yeah, there used to be a colour called that. Of course, you know,
God.
They were, And she, to her, it was nothing. And that's what I mean about feeding my bank. That story is in there somewhere about this nun asking for this very specific colour for herself, and it's all packed in with faith and you know, the layers of that is just huge. But that story has got to be told in some way, shape or form. I don't know how. I don't know when I'm going to use it. But that's what I mean about feeding your bank.
Okay. Wow. I know that one of the other things that you were, and I don't know if you still are doing, was being a DJ.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a bit about that and if you're still DJing?
I am still DJing.
Okay.
But the equipment has changed.
Yes.
So my kids laugh at me. I'm like, well, what's all these buttons for? Look at this. What do you mean you just need a stick? So yeah, it's and again the thing that informs my bank, right? So I'm in the middle of writing a TV series about a pirate DJ.
Nice.
Back in the 90s in Sheffield, negotiating the police and everything else that we negotiated. So I am still DJing sometimes. In fact, I did a gig a couple of weeks ago, but I end up doing it for like friends and family because it just feels like I still haven't digitized my records yet. So I've got hundreds and hundreds of records and it just looks like a really big job and you can't get these records again. And then you go on YouTube, it's always the wrong mix. It's not the one I've got, and I've got somebody got me one of those record players that digitizes your things for you, but it takes so long and taps into my lazy gene. But I will get around to doing it. But yeah, I'm still DJing sometimes. Yeah,
okay.
I was terrible on the mic, by the way. When I did my favorite DJing is the radio. As we were saying before, you know, interacting with an audience, I loved it. When I went legal, it was so boring and dry. And I had to, when I was legal, I did the early morning slot, which is quite prime time, and that was terrible. I was really bad.
Do you not have the banter?
No, I was really bad at it. I think I might have got sacked. But anyway, so I prefer radio DJing, really. I prefer the easy kind of, I'm just putting on a tune that I really like. Hopefully you like it, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Never planned a playlist or anything, just kind of rocked up with loads of tunes and just went to it. So I prefer that actually more than the making a crowd dance, because that's a different kind of DJing. That was competitive, super blokey. You know, there's times when people would pay the guy that was on before me but not pay me. So I got paid in Lucasade one time. Because, you know, and obviously because the music culture in Sheffield was completely different to London. So that kind of music, black music, reggae, hip hop, jungle, R&B was all not in the city centre. It was always on the outskirts, and then they could pay you what you want, whatever they wanted to pay you. So yeah, put me on the radio. Don't put me back in the club.
Oh wow. So yeah, thank you so much. That's been really interesting to hear about your process and a little bit about what informs your writing today. I guess last little question is just about a bit of advice. So do you have just a little bit of advice for someone starting out as a writer?
I would say trust your instincts.
Yeah.
Don't worry too much about what you think you should be doing. I think should is a really bad word. You should ban it from the English language. I think just relax. You really got this. You can do it. I do feel like I've talked about the industry a little bit. I do think that sometimes we kind of mystify stuff that we don't have to. We don't democratize stuff and say, I feel like if I can do it, anybody else can do it. The other thing I think that's probably not quite talked about enough is if you're going to write for fame, don't do that because you're going to be broke. And it's going to take a long time. Write because you love it.
Yeah.
Write out of passion. desire is part of the writing process. So do what you love. And even if it doesn't love you back for a bit, it doesn't matter because you're doing what you love.
Okay.
That's what I'd say.
Thank you so much, Desiree Reynolds. Thank you.
Thank you.
This episode's prompt is: you meet a woman at a cafe who sells you a box of tea. She says it is rejuvenating and changed her life. She suggests you drink one every night. What happens next? This is a Culture Word production. Thank you to our funders, The Space and Arts Council England. Recorded at Silver Lining Music Studio.